the current standings for the Grand Prix. In first place, Fabiano Caruana with 230 points. Carl Nakamura, my buddy from the U.S., 207. Now, they're on the third leg, which is Tbilisi, I believe it's pronounced. You'll see it there. And you'll see Caruana and Nakamura and Karyakin are playing in it, because they're currently playing in Zurich Chess Challenge. And the other one is not playing as well as Boris Gelfand. Now, there's going to be another leg to this Grand Prix, and I'm sure all those guys will be in it. But currently, these are the standings. The top 2 players get in the candidates' final tournament. That's the tournament to determine who plays Magnus Carlsen for the World Championship. Pretty exciting stuff. Hi, folks. John Cordisco back again. Round 1 of the third leg of the FIDE Grand Prix. This is a series of FIDE tournaments they're having to determine who gets in the candidates' final tournament. No, it's a whole series of tournaments to see who the small group that plays to challenge Magnus Carlsen next year for the World Championship. Right now, I know my buddy Carl Nakamura is in the top 2, but this is a game that I picked out because it's somebody that is number 2 in the world and I think doesn't even get nearly enough recognition for his chess skill than he deserves. As white as Rustin Kasimdzhanov, you remember him from years ago, he's the former FIDE world champion, and Alexander Grischuk from Russia, who, I'll tell you the truth, guy's over 2,800. You don't hear about him much. He doesn't seem to get invited to the big tournaments. I don't know why. Anyway, it's somebody that could very easily win the entire Grand Prix series and maybe even win the candidates final. Now, he didn't do that well in the last candidates final, but I think Grischuk is very, very underestimated. Anyway, folks, enough of my ramblings. Kasimdzhanov is white, Grischuk is black. It's going to be a Queen's Gambit decline, semi-Slav. E3, B5, A4, C6, Bishop D2. Now, it's funny how these D4 openings now are starting to come out more and more. I think Vladimir Kramnik got his wish. He told Nigel Short years ago in his Berlin defense. He's doing everything in his power to make sure that nobody plays E4 anymore as white. And I think he's starting to get his wish. A5, A takes, Bishop takes, Pawn takes, B3. Like I said, it's a game. Interesting, the pawns, though, on the queen side for black. I don't know. That's be tough to handle, but Bishop B7 for black. Kasimdzhanov takes. Grischuk goes B4. Pushes right through, which is, of course, the way to go. Now you've got 2 connected pass pawns. Pretty far down on move 11. But I'm sure this is all booked to these guys. Bishop B2, Knight F6, Bishop D3 for Kasimdzhanov. Interesting. I'll tell you the truth, I like white's setup. And the computer kind of agrees with me. A little less than half a pawn advantage for white. Pretty solid, though. He's got the bishop pair, white does. Got really good pawn chain. We'll see how he handles the A and B pawns for black. Knight finally comes out his last minor piece. They both castle, rook D1. Pretty much standard stuff. It's if you're black here and you have a pawn on A5 and B4, when is the good time to start pushing these? I always have trouble with this. Maybe some of you could help me out in the comment section. I always have trouble with this. When do you really start them get going? Do you trade down a lot of pieces then start, or you do it early? Knight to E4, C5, Bishop, pretty good blockader, but we know the knights are the best blockaders. Queen to C2, F5. Interesting. I think Grischuk is playing really well here, really dynamically. The only problem I see is maybe his E6 pawn's a little backward, but he's playing okay. I'll tell you, watch out for Alexander Grischuk in the this Grand Prix series and maybe even the candidates final, which I'm sure he'll probably get in. Bishop c4, and I also hear Grischuk is a very good poker player. Queen e7 to guard that e6 pawn. Bishop b3. King h8, just to get out of this nasty bishop on his king. Rook comes over. Queen e8, just got a lot of maneuvering here. Bishop a4. Bishop takes. Computer likes queen takes by a hair's breadth, but Kasimdzhanov decided to take with a rook instead. Now this is the part of the game for me that you have to be extremely careful. I know I do. Grischuk decides to bring the other knight over. Rook a to d1. Queen to b5. Now, computer thought it might have been interesting. Knight to g4 instead, which I thought that was the reason why he moved the knight. Then after rook takes, rook takes, rook takes, knight takes, d5. The game is a lot more fun to play, but it's about a point advantage at this point for white. So I can see why Grischuk didn't go down that road. Knight to e5, that's a good spot for that knight. Nothing can really harass it except for another knight. Knight to g4, Grischuk goes that way. Now, right now, it's looking pretty good for white. Queen to d3 is a suggested move for white. Knight takes g4, and that brings the game right down to even. White had a small advantage to that point. Computer like queen to d3, then after bishop, queen to bishop 7, c6, knight takes, c takes. Look at that. You're threatening to take the rook on a8 and the white's pawns in pre. But they didn't go that route. F takes, queen takes, queen e2. Rook to f1. Still an advantage for white. I like white's pawn chain. I mean, look at this. It's beautiful aesthetically. I mean, look at this. Nice, huh? Queen takes e6. White's up a pawn. b3. Here comes black's passed pawns. Wow. What are you going to do now? Queen to c4 for Kasimdzhanov. Worth looking at might have been queen takes g4. Then after queen d1, get the queen right back. Rook takes, queen takes, pawn takes. It's rook to c4. Interesting. You all see why, though, of course. If rook takes, pawn promotes queen's check. After queen to c4, rook to f6. Now white's starting to slowly lose it. Queen to c1, it's an even game. Queen to e2. Just putting the pressure on. Worried about that b-pawn. Sometimes the threat of doing something is actually stronger than the thing you're going to do. And this is where I don't know if Kasimdzhanov was in time trouble, but he goes c6, and immediately it's a 3-point advantage for white, or excuse me, black. Now it's climbing to over 4-point advantage. Queen to c4 basically saves the game, because after queen to d2, queen takes, and that's an even game. He messes up c6, b2, just keep on going. Queen to c4, queen to d2, c7. How many times do you see each side has a pawn on the 7th rank? Rook c8, queen b3. It's a 10-point advantage now, 11 now for black. White is just doomed. Rook comes over, queen to d1, rook takes f2. Beautiful. Absolutely beautiful. And that's where Kasimdzhanov resigns. To give you an idea what would have happened after white queens, rook takes check, king, rook takes, queen, queen g2 mate. So there you have it. Grischuk was down a little bit, kept the pressure on, and Kasimdzhanov miscued and buckled. So congratulations to Alexander Grischuk. Interesting game. So let's a game from round 1 of the current leg of the FIDE Grand Prix series. I hope you enjoyed it. I want you all to remember, if you think chess is just a game, you're not playing it right. Take care, folks. Bye-bye.